Thanks everybody for taking a little bit of time out of your day to join us in this session. Hopefully we'll get some good stuff in here that'll be useful to you. We'll cover what's new in the utilities. We'll take some time and look back into history and some other stuff. We'll take a look at the agenda as it's coming around, but I was really excited about the features and capabilities that we've got coming through here. As mentioned, my name is Joe Eikenseer. I'm coming to you out of our Denver office location. I've been with IMAGINiT for a while. It's one of those things where I keep on telling myself I need to update that picture. It's a wee bit more gray now than it was with that one. I think, as with so many other people, is you forget to update some of those headshots that are sitting out there. But I've been working in our industry for a good long period of time. One of those steps where you're saying over X amount of years just to feel a little bit better about yourself, perhaps from time to time. But my role is I get to work with everybody in our company that does anything related to buildings and construction, facilities management, you name it. And with that, it also means I get to do things like play around with our Clarity product, our utilities for Revit, help out with all sorts of things there. And as I was going through that and thinking, well, we've got our new utilities that are coming out for the 2023 version. What can we do to have some interesting things around this to not only talk about what's new, but what's got us to here? Let's remind ourselves of some of those other types of utilities that are out there. We're well over 50 different types of things that are sitting inside our utilities for Revit. So it's not just the items that are new, but a little bit going back. And with the amount of time that I've had with the company, one of the things that I was doing is trying to remember what was the first utility that we ever brought out, because there's all this stuff that we've got dozens and dozens and dozens of different things that you can see down there in a little screen cap at the bottom of the chart here. But my mind, when I was thinking about it, when the API for Revit came around and we were able to start doing things, I was remembering that the first tool that we ever created and looked to share with everyone was a tool for updating door numbers so that they could match room numbers. And one of the things that we had and we were thinking at the time was, well, let's put this out there. We'll give it away for free, and inevitably the Revit software itself will build in some sort of similar capability native. And here we are many years later, and it's still one of the more frequently used tools that we've got inside our utilities for a portfolio. But it turns out I was wrong. As I started going into the Wayback Machine, I chatted a little bit with some of our development team, pulled my own memory and searching through old emails and things. The first tool that we ever started making was actually one that would allow you to take a Revit model, export it to a KMZ or KML at the time file, and get it into Google Earth. So the Google Earth connector, sometimes just called the Earth connector, was the first tool that we ever started doing. Not the door mark update that I thought it was, but Google Earth connector. So, hey, things that we learn, things that we remember. The first set of utilities that we came out with in November of 2007 was a whopping 4 tools in our utilities for Revit. So, it's the whole thing of we've come a long way from room renumber, which is, again, still heavily used. Door mark update, still heavily used. Change case, we'll see this in a little bit of where it sits in the recently used types of tools. Piece that I don't know, ashamed is probably not quite the right word, but we had built a tool that allowed you could customize and go from somewhere else other than Revit City, but go to different types of discussion board sites and use it as a place to try and find and download families and come through. Yeah, it was a good experience to be able to see how it works and what it can do, but maybe not one of the best utilities ever. In fact, that one's gone largely now. It still exists in a place where you could find a way to reactivate it, but not being used because there's the general feel of we don't want people willy-nilly going out to the internet and grabbing any file that somebody might have dropped on a discussion board and use it in $1 billion project. Let's be a little more selective than that. But suffice it to say, though, that's where we started in 2006, 2007, starting to build things up. Now, Jumping forward in time a little bit, there's a whole bunch of utilities that we've been adding every year as we're going along. If we go into more recent history, looking at things, if we go back to 2019, so new in our utilities for Revit for 2019, which would be in alignment with when Revit 2019 came out. We had this. I actually stole this from the presentation that we had for that update, a few years back now. And all the recent types of things. So in 2019, we added annotation font, shared parameter checking, and a family placement type of tool. And you can see where we were adding some different things up until then. One of the items that we had in those earlier releases is as we added a new tool, say for the 2019 release, those 3 new utilities only worked with Revit 2019. Now, part of it was because of programming interface changes, API changes, and when things could be done versus when they couldn't be done. But part of it was just how we were developing at the time. When we got into the 2020 release of utilities for Revit, we had a big update in 2020. Added a lot of different tools and things that you can see here. And I'm about to sneeze. And that did not blow out your speakers. So sorry about that. As we're going into this new for 2020, all those different types of features and things through there. One of the things that we also adjusted at that point in time is we made it so that all of these tools would work retroactively with all supported versions of Revit. Now there's a couple of things through there with the fabrication part numbering. Well, it wouldn't work in some of the older versions of Revit because they didn't have fabrication parts. So it's the supported versions of Revit related to what it's working on and what's currently supported at that time by both ourselves and by Autodesk. Going from there to 2021. So if we're going to look at the tools that we made new for that version, added a few extra things, a CAD block insert. So it's where you could take a block from a linked CAD file and substitute it with a Revit family. So helping out with making transitions from CAD to BIM, so to speak. Project information synchronization, different options for cleaning up projects before presumably sending it out. Conversely, enhanced transfer project standards for bringing things in. Moving into 2022, last year, we had a big emphasis on working with point clouds. One of the things that was by popular demand from maybe you or just IMAGINiT customers in general to be able to go through and say, well, I want to be able to go back to some tools that IMAGINiT used to have when we had some specific tools and utilities for working with point clouds in Revit. We'd since retired that and working with our partner in Leica Geosystems incorporated a lot of those functions into their tool set. But there were a few things that, yeah, they may overlap, but would be really good and nice for people to have without needing to go to the full Leica tools. We're somewhere in that in-between stage and focused in on what we had for point cloud tools. So that's a lot of what we had for the recent history. Now, if we look back at all of that and some of the new tools as well that are coming up, I'd mentioned that there's a lot of those tools like door mark update, the room number update and such that are still heavily used today. Well, we got some feedback from actual utilization of the utilities. And this is 1 week of customer usage data of, how many times were certain buttons clicked and just capturing some information like that. Now, this is, I think it's fairly recent. I think this is just like 2 weeks ago, maybe 3, but it's very, very recent data. So we're not reaching back, oh, this is what we did 2 years ago. This is now. And the types of commands and things that people are running. So some number of people out there are using that dimension update command fairly frequently. It's a place where you can specify a prefix, suffix, some sort of text to go above or below dimension, just adding some things, and then you can specify that prefix or suffix and then start picking dimensions, and it'll quickly start applying that text to all the different dimensions that you're picking. Instead of pick one, go to override, type it in, and say, okay, pick the next, go to override, type it in, click the next. That's the purpose for all of these tools, is we want to take something that's a repetitive process something that you have to have some interaction with and help you do it faster. And in some places, maybe accomplish some things that you might not be able to do at all too easily without the utilities for Revit, but trying to get in there and make it faster. Sheet duplicator. Instead of manually duplicating sheets and spending half an hour, however long it might be to create all the different sheets that you have for a set, to quickly go through and duplicate the sheets and their supporting views as you're working on your documentation set, renumbering objects, updating spaces, updating room renumber. We can see there it's in the top 10. Processing families in batch. The utility management is a tool that we can use to control what IMAGINiT utilities for Revit are showing up in our ribbon and which ones don't really matter to you. If you're architecture, do you not really care about some of the MEP things or vice versa? So we can optimize what's showing up in that ribbon, because as we keep on adding more and more, again, over 50 different items, it gets pretty big. Now, what this has an impact for, and so first off, you get to see here, if you've got the utilities and you know what you are using, you can see the types of things of where you fit into this overall scheme. Or if you don't have them, this is what you could be doing with the utilities for Revit. Maybe there's a tool in there that you're not clicking on that you could or should and just haven't been for whatever reason it is. But the other thing to think about is, what is this saving you? It's over 2,700 different times that the buttons were clicked. Now, granted, things for somebody hitting the help, about button, that's not really saving you time. So let's be fair through there. If we're looking at some of the different types of items, we've got a button for sending in support tickets to our Productivity Now support center. Maybe saving a little bit of time, but it's not going to be as dramatic. So some of these time saved is going to be seconds. But then if we look at other things like maybe sheet duplicator or going through in the Excel import export of data, to be able to batch edit data and suck those changes back in, that could be minutes to half an hour to hours worth of time saved on some of these tools. So there's a huge range of how much time savings you might get depending on the nature of the particular utility that you're running. But I did some quick math on it, and really let's aim what I think would be exceedingly conservatively low and say, on average, if we were to be doing some of these things and it takes, say you save 2 minutes, just 2 minutes by clicking on these things, we've basically got 2 full-time equivalent people that are covered by these IMAGINiT utilities from just those things that people are clicking on. So it's 90 hours per week that IMAGINiT's customers, if it's only 2 minutes. Now, you could take that and say basically each additional minute saved is another full-time equivalent. So if we averaged it out and it was 10 minutes on average saved for some of these things because of the nature of the tools that you're using and what it does save you, then all of a sudden it just these things grow, not exponentially, but pretty darn quickly. And it's really impressive to my mind of the types of things that people are doing. Now, if I go back in my slide for a minute so we could get that thing off of it, some of the things, just so that you're aware, are curious to me when we see this. For me, it's curious that we've got people out there that are still doing things like using DWF files. I don't know of too many people that are using DWFs versus PDF or whatever else is out there, but it's out there. People are still using it. The very first utility we ever made back in 2006, Earth Connector, was used 13 times, we'll say 2 weeks ago. I'm not exactly sure about that, but some of these things are still being used today, and it's incredible what's possible and what people are still running with and using all these years later. So from that, so that's our trip back memory lane, and thanks for dealing with me going through that. It might have been interesting to you as well, just to see some of that history, but it was certainly some nostalgic stuff on my end. That gets us to what's now, what's currently new in these utilities for Revit. And this new release for 2023, we've got an emphasis on these items, which is, again, just trying to do more with the tools and the environment that you've got in Revit today. Where we've had for some time now the ability to take data, parameter information, put that into Excel, make changes into Excel, and suck those changes back into the Revit model. That's been around for a while, but what we have now added in is the ability to just take a spreadsheet and add it into your Revit project to help out with documentation when the data, it's not parameter information that we care about, or it's not connected to parameter data in some fashion or another. We just want to take this bit of a spreadsheet and dump it onto a sheet for the sake of documentation. It's not BIM data, it's just construction data or whatever it might happen to be. We've had for a while now some requests from customers and internally IMAGINiT staff as well, saying it'd be great if we had some better way of documenting what's going on inside a template file or inside a Revit file, so we can compare and see where some of these things are different. What are the fonts that are text styles that are being used in our template versus this other project? Where are they different? Line styles, things like that. So project template reporting is coming from there, where we can export information to Excel to be able to understand that. Continuing on with that idea of helping with that migration of CAD to BIM, I'd mentioned the ability to replace a block with a Revit family. Well, what we're taking next is, let's talk about rooms and potentially also walls for helping out with converting from CAD to BIM. So really cool, some interesting things there. We've had the ability with room objects to copy rooms from one phase to another for a while now. And recently, somebody kind of slapped us upside the head and said, well, you've got that for rooms, why don't you have it for spaces? It's like, oh, that's a good idea. So we now have the ability to copy spaces from one phase of a project to another, and also to be able to create spaces from existing room objects from an architectural model. That may not always be the workflow that you're looking at, but if it can be helpful, yeah, heck, why not? And then further enhancement to a support utility. We've had the ability in our utilities for Revit for a while to be able to hit a button and send information to our support team. So you're running into some problem with Revit, and our support team says, hey, can you send me XYZ from that model, log files, journals, things like that. Well, what we have now is the ability to initiate the process from here. So you click the button, create a support ticket with the IMAGINiT team straight from there, as opposed to create a support ticket and then when they ask for the data, go back and click this button. We're just streamlining that process. So those are the utilities that we have that are new for the 2023 version, which then gets us to, let's go see it live. Now, as we're doing this, there's a few things that we'll look at, and I'm trying to keep what we've got for presentations as real as possible with as little pre-configured, of course it worked, it's a demo set data, as possible. But I do need some background information, background drawings to work with. So as we're looking at the, excuse me, things through here, the model that we're looking at here, this architectural file, is a model that we use inside our Revit MEP classes. It's the background that we'll use for that. So this is an imaginary building, an imaginary project. And when we're looking at this for the different types of tools that we've got, once you've got the utilities for Revit 2023 installed, they will appear up here in Revit in an IMAGINiT ribbon, and it's all this stuff here. We've also got, I've got some ribbons here for IMAGINiT Clarity stuff. The scan to BIM function that I've got here is the new tools that we had in the 2022 version, working with point clouds and such. I'll let that go back up to the top. We separated it out because it's a bit of a different type of functions than the others, so we just left it as its own panel. But here's all of our tools. When we're looking at the items that are sitting out there, the options we have for working with Excel are, as you might expect, underneath the Excel dropdown, where we'll have importing and creating. We do it as a schedule, but basically the ability to bring in an Excel spreadsheet and leverage it in Revit just as a spreadsheet only, not data, just spreadsheet. So that'll be our Excel from Revit. The project data report is sitting right underneath that. The option for CAD of creating rooms from walls or polylines essentially is underneath our CAD drop-down list. Go figure on that. So that we've got our CAD block insert where we replace the block with a family, and then our rooms from CAD is the new feature sitting in there. On the MEP end, is where we've got our space copying information. So copying and creating spaces from a room object, or conversely, copying from one phase to another. And then the support button. This support button was here before, so that's not a new icon inside our ribbon, but I'll go ahead and start with that. If we click on support here, I've got a second screen that everything is showing up on, so let me drag it back over. We've got a slightly updated dialog box in here, which really is this intermediate information of, yeah, send my stuff into the IMAGINiT support team. I don't need a support case, or I do need a support case. I've got an existing one, whatever it needs to be. Give a quick description for what's going on. And then once that is hitting its way, we go to say, collect the data. And this is what, if I were to click the submit button, what would get sent into the IMAGINiT team. I would get a new support ticket for this item. It would optionally send in my current Revit journal file, information about the current session of Revit, if I happen to be connected to Autodesk Revit server, what version of Revit am I running. So basic information that can help our team help you with whatever challenge you're running into right at that point in time. So the key part of all this being the option for, let's just initiate a support ticket from here and let it ride. So part one, nice and easy for that. Now, other types of things we've got. So this is my background file for rooms. I just wanted to be, again, transparent with what we're looking at through here. This is just a basic model. I've got some classrooms. I've got each wing set up for some different numbers. So this is my 1000 wing. Then I've got some 2000 series numbers, just wherever it needs to be. Now, if I'm going through all of this and I realize that, what, some of these numbers need to be different, just as a kind of reminder of how some of these things do or can work. Way back in some of that renumbering stuff, you remember that we had room renumbering was one of the first tools that we ever had inside our system. The flow that we'll have through this will be very, very similar to flows that we've got in all of our other tools, where I can say, hey, renumber based off picking things in a certain order. I can draw a line and then say, well, the path of the line from beginning to end defines the order of the rooms. I can renumber based off of another level of the building. I can say, hey, collapse and fill all the holes of my numbering sequences. All these types of things are there. But if I were to do that and say next, well, let's say my 2000 series in here, I want to make a 6000 series. I'm just making something up, but I can say, well, here will be room number 6001, 6002, there's 3, and then we'll start 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, just for kicks and giggles. It's kind of the opposite direction of what we were doing before. Go 14 there, and maybe this will be 15 for the quarter. I've finished picking everything. I'll hit escape to say, yep, I'm done with picking. It says, here's all those existing rooms and such that we've got here right now. Starting room number, I said, what, 6,000? So I'll say 6,000, increment by 1. Here's all the proposed room numbers. When I hit renumber here, I've got some screen display resolution compression going on, but hit the renumber button and it will go through, and all of these were renumbered. So taking that for a small wing like this, not a big deal, but if we wanted to renumber an entire model, it's just the same type of process. That let it roll and just make these things faster and easier than it would have been before. So as an example, and there's that file. Now, if I want to take this type of concept, and that was kind of the reminder of how we did things with rooms, and apply it to what we need to do with some of the new spaces functions that we've got now for MEP spaces, I'm going to go ahead and start a new model. And I'm going to base this off of just the stock out of the box MEP systems template. And in here, once that's done, actually something I'll need to do once it loads up is get rid of the floor one drawing, because I'm going to bring the architectural model in as a background, right? I don't need to save my changes. I don't really care about that right now. So again, with the idea of this is trying to work with something that's not a pre-made demo set, I'll grab the architectural school, origin to origin, open it up, link that in. This is not the fastest computer in the world intentionally, so just OCD on my end, get this graphics out of the way. So here's that model. Now, because some of those tools that we have for the MEP spaces relate to phasing, this building that I have in the background is all drawn in the existing phase. So everything here is grayed out. Now, one of the things we can note for that is if I go to my MEP tools and we've got our space copy function, I can say, hey, copy spaces from the rooms in the linked model. So if the rooms that the architect created are in alignment with what I want to have for MEP spaces, maybe it's a big if, but if, we could go ahead and use this. On my other screen, bring it over, I can say from the architectural school background in the existing phase, copy over everything from floor 1 and give it a tag with area. Now, I know that I'm going to have an error message in here, and I'm doing it on purpose so that you can see it as well. And it's also, it's a fun one. Due to an API oddity, I just like the phrasing that they threw into that. Please rerun it. So we've got existing. So we're copying from existing. So we need to be in a view that is also set to the existing phase. So that makes sense. So okay, we'll cancel out. There's something else I need to do in here, which is also, I need to take this Revit file as a link, and didn't want to click there, select the file, edit type, and make it so that it is room bounding. Otherwise my MEP spaces won't, I'll get some warnings. So make that change, go back into my view settings, set it to be an existing project. And when I do that, all of my walls get a little bit darker. It's, again, because of views settings, it's not full black lines, but it's a little bit better. Come back in here and MEP, space copy from rooms from a linked model, drag it back over again. Architectural, existing, floor 1, let's add in a tag and go. So it thinks about it and pretty quickly here. Now, I could have gone through creating spaces and said, make all my spaces and just place them automatically everywhere. And that would have worked, but doing it this way, I've got all of my associated information from the room object copied over. So I've got a little bit more relevant data built into my MEP spaces if this is that style of workflow that's pertinent to you in some given point in time. But because these are all spaces, rooms are all phase aware, if I go back into my view properties and say, you know what, we're not existing anymore, we're now into new construction, all that stuff goes away because spaces are phase aware. They exist only in one particular point in time, but that's where we can get to the MEP tools for space copy, and let's copy things between phases. So I now have the phases from level 1 in the existing phase, either maybe on purpose, maybe on accident, whatever, but I can say from the existing phase, I've got 67, copy them to new construction. It knows, you saw me, I just started this, is your existing spaces. Let's go ahead and add in a standard space tag instead of the one with area and say okay, and it's going to go through and copy all those spaces plus their embedded data and copy it into the new phase. So the key thing with all of this is that we're paying attention to and working with the data that's sitting behind the scenes with everything that we're working on. So quick items, the idea being that speed of bringing things through. If we take a look at that and think about the amount of time it would have taken, this is not a big model, and yeah, workflows will vary from place to place. This is just clicking through to say, hey, here's how it all works, how we can copy things from one phase to another. But if you were manually creating all of those spaces and then manually maybe copy and paste data from an old space to a new space, it's a heck of a lot more than 2 minutes, even with this small of a building. So trying to get an idea of the savings that we get by running through all of this. Now, if we ever needed to from there, we've still got our existing tools where we can have phase-aware copying of data from a linked architectural file to update room names, room numbers, or other data inside our space from the architectural room object. That tool's been around for a while. It's still available to us to be able to leverage as we're going forward. Now, getting into some of the other types of tools that we have through here, let's say we're playing with Excel. We need to bring in an Excel spreadsheet into this file. I'm going to start off by going in, let's collapse a little bit from some of these default views we were looking at, and I'm going to create a sheet. So we have somewhere to place that spreadsheet once it has been made. So there's all sorts of possibilities in what you might do with bringing in a spreadsheet. There are just times when you need to bring in, it's not BIM data necessarily, or maybe it is a shortcut and we don't like it, but maybe. We just got different things to pull through. So I went out and grabbed a couple of sample spreadsheets from Excel. So there's a few different things we can look at. I grabbed a spreadsheet that is an IMAGINiT Clarity ROI calculator that we pulled together that says, hey, if you're saving X dollars over whatever period of time, this is what it looks like. So a basic spreadsheet here. We've got some formulas set up. We do not copy in the formula that's coming through. We'll copy in the resulting value that's in that cell, but not the formula that's behind it. So that's one of the spreadsheets that we'll be looking at. There's another one over here where I've got just some extra graphics that are sitting around. I want to grab this table down here of the widgets that were sold. It's just different types of examples of data. So I wanted to be able to get the up arrows and down arrows. There's some extra formatting in here. This was a sample from a learning site, publicly available online that we grabbed. I've got a bar graph. So if we wanted to be able to show, here's how information is tracked and what's going on, and have that represented in construction documents, that's sitting up through there. Something else that I've seen actually a couple times, not everywhere, but a couple of times, here's an Excel spreadsheet that's got a Gantt chart in it. So project schedule that we wanted to show, or aspects of a project schedule clipped onto a sheet. Now, some of this we could have done through, screen cap, save as a JPEG, bring the JPEG in, but then there's a more convoluted updating process that we might not like through all there. So these are possibilities. Those are 3 different spreadsheets that I've got that we can look to bring in and to see where it's coming from Excel. So we go to our Excel tools. I'll say, let's create a schedule from Excel and bring my window over from primary screen. So we've got this stuff. As it says, it's not BIM data. We use the other Excel tools we have if we need to work with BIM data. This is display and documentation purposes. I'll click the add button and we'll go browse out to a folder that I just so happen to have on my desktop. We'll start with that Clarity ROI calculator. One of the things I would strongly recommend when we're using this is in Excel, create these things called named ranges. If you don't know about them, look them up. They're worthwhile. It's where you can select a series or a group of cells on a worksheet and give it a name, and that's your named range. And the tool that we've got tends to work a lot better if you're just pulling in a named range, because you can be specific of, here's the exact set of cells from Excel that I want to bring in, as opposed to the entire worksheet. So this is that ROI year 1 from that Clarity ROI calculator. Bring that in, processes it, and it will actually add itself in as a schedule over here that we'll see in a minute that we can then drag into the sheet. We had from the other worksheet, we had some other samples. We'll grab this one next. Instead of all that, we'll select none and grab my 2 named ranges here, the bar graph and the widget sales, as 2 different sets of different types of things we can pull in. The third one takes a little bit longer because it's a bit more complex, which is the project schedule, that Gantt chart type looking thing. Select none, and we'll go to, actually in this case, I don't have a good named range for just the overall piece, so we'll just grab the whole worksheet. We'll just do it. It'll take a little bit longer because I'm grabbing the whole worksheet. So you can see here, if nothing else from a performance standpoint, named ranges will be nice, but it's bringing in all that data as a Gantt chart, masquerading as a Revit schedule, so that I can then turn around and place it onto a sheet. So there's my 4 different types of spreadsheets sitting out here as schedules. We do have an auto update feature. If that is turned on, every time you open up the Revit file, if you have the IMAGINiT utilities loaded on that machine, it will attempt to go ahead and update the graphics of the schedule of the spreadsheet when you open up the file. We will also have an option of just directly saying, yeah, let's update this manually, or whenever other time you need it to be. So automatic or not, as you see fit. I've pulled in everything, I'm done there. And if we look at our list of schedules, here's my bar graph. I've got a couple that were just stock built into this template that I started the model from, Gantt chart, ROI, and widget sales. So if I look at the ROI calculator, double click on that one. And here is, drag this out of the way, that spreadsheet sitting out in here. Now, there are going to be some times where it might need to take something like what we're looking at here, where there were some merged cells, and re-merge them in our environment here. There's going to be maybe a little bit of cleanup that you might have to do just to make sure everything is good. We might resize some of these columns based off of how they came through and how you want them to appear. So we have the ability to tweak all of these things, to customize it a bit. But all that said, now that it's essentially, it's just a Revit schedule, we can drop all of these in, and these are the different spreadsheets. I think this one, yeah, we'll need to make this a little bit wider based off of font sizes, but I've got my up-down arrows, including all the coloring that came from Excel. And this is just Excel data coming through. The bar graph that was showing different levels of performance at different points in time for what we were looking at here. If I wanted to grab that Gantt chart, which was here, project schedule, and drop that in. So all these different types of things, whether we're looking at something that's a little bit more unique from a schedule or a spreadsheet that you need to bring in, or if it's something as simple as formulated data that may or may not be related to your BIM data, but it's part of the documentation set and you want it to be embedded into your sheets. All of these are just those different sheet sets. So as an example though, if I were to go through, and we'll just make a simple change through here in Excel, here's that ROI calculator, and we call this, instead of a date, it's now June 16th, 2022. It's a simple change. I don't need to make wholesale changes, but we've got that. I'll save that spreadsheet, come back here, and in our utilities for Revit, let me bring it back up again so we can see it better. We'll go into our Excel schedule from Excel tools, and all I need to do here is, well, I could have saved and reopened the file, or more importantly, we just say update the ROI year one, update that schedule. It'll think for a minute, make the updates, and in the background, we close this out, 6/16/2022. So it's quick things through there. Now, there are going to be some of those limitations inside the tool. We need to be fair with that. But so like re-merging some of the cells might need to do so we can tweak and make the imported spreadsheet look appropriate on the Revit environment. But we've got all that data here, and it's linked back to those original spreadsheets. If you've got the utilities for Revit installed, and if your computer has access to that original spreadsheet. If you don't, these spreadsheets still move with you. If you transfer the file to somebody else, these graphics still go with the file because they're masquerading as schedules. They just won't update according to any changes that come on through. So there's a couple things that are going on. Now, from here as well, we have the idea of, not parameters, of Excel for the project report export. Now, I expect we'll be adding to this one as time's going on, and I would highly encourage everybody here and those that are watching later or whatever to provide some feedback of what are the types of things you'd like to see added to this report that's coming through. Because we've got some data here. We don't want it to be absolutely everything. That'd be a very messy, maybe not messy, but that'd be a very convoluted spreadsheet to look at if we had quote unquote everything exported out. I mean, for that matter, if we're doing that, you just go to Kobe. We want to be a little bit more targeted with what we're looking at here. So with that in mind, if I go to my project report export, this is just from the new file that I opened up and started a new drawing from just right now, and that appeared on the other screen. So instead of my documents folder, I'm going to throw this onto my desktop in my utilities folder, just because that's where I've got everything going right now for this presentation. And I'll call this sample export for an Excel file. Save that out. I'll say, yeah, why not include element IDs for these items. So if I needed to, I could search for them and find them again, either by different API calls if you're doing something with Dynamo, or if we wanted to, whatever, it's there. We'll go ahead and hit export. It will create that spreadsheet for me. I say, yes, please open that file. And we'll get a new session of Excel launching. And here it is. So overview page, this is the information that we're pulling out right now. Wall types through global parameters, this data sitting right here. Obviously, there's a lot that could grow into here. This is where we're actively soliciting feedback of what else do you believe should be included in a list of things that we're exporting out. We've got some feedback already saying, hey, can we get pipe types or all sorts of different things. We'll just let that go. But right now, if we'll say this, drawing started from an MEP template, doesn't have too many wall types, but they are in here. Now we're not getting the wall assembly information from the the subcomponents, but here are the overall wall elements that are in here, materials that are loaded inside this file. One of the key things in my mind that's in here would be things like view templates. What view templates exist in drawing model 1 versus model 2, and what are some of the overall settings? Now in here, we're not saying what are the visibility graphic settings within a specific template. We're staying at that high level, but what view templates do exist in here? What text styles do exist in here, and what are some of their settings? Line styles, line patterns, fill patterns. The thing I like about the fill patterns is we're also telling, or line patterns, here is what the line pattern definition is. We're able to pull that information out. As I said, fill patterns, overall project parameters, global parameters that are assigned to this. We can pull that from any different Revit file really quickly. Once it's there, it's Excel. So we get to play all sorts of fun with data, push, pull, compare, conditional formatting, you name it, just pull it from multiple different files. So that was a lot of some of the different information in there, but there's a few things that are still left. I'm going to start a new model again. Again, this is the idea of no smoke and mirrors. This is going to be based off the architectural template. And we've got the additional CAD tools to be able to help out with migration from CAD to BIM. It's maybe an overused phrase, but it's still out there. In here, I'm going to go ahead and insert a link to a CAD file. Now, I do have, there is a little bit of preparation that I did on this AutoCAD file. I'll pull it up in AutoCAD in just a second here. I know that this is inches, drop it in everywhere. Normally you do current view only. I'm not on purpose for just a moment. And here is that file. Now, with the idea of we need to have something, I can't use customer data for this, but in AutoCAD here, this is the file that it came in. If you ever remember back to the AutoCAD days, there's sample files inside the AutoCAD deliverable. So, and there was a sample file of, it's kind of like a home type of thing. It's part of a sheet set sample that comes with AutoCAD. This drawing on the left-hand side came from that sheet set sample. It turns out that that sample is really messy. It's actually not, from a OCD CAD person, it's not good. There's plenty of places where there were lines that we're not touching. There were lines that are slightly off axis even here. Like looking at this, that was a bunch of different things like that going around. So I did admittedly do a little bit of cleanup on this file so that I would have lines on door header, window header layers. And then I went through and I used the AutoCAD bpoly command to create a bunch of polylines around the different quote unquote room objects through there. There's still some messy stuff going on in this file, but that's going to be reality too. And then if needed for later on, if we wanted to see how the CAD block replacement with family thing went, I went ahead and created a sample desk. Let's say it was a classroom now instead of a home, and we could replace that with a desk family. That's a possibility. So this is one way that you might look at files where you've got a polyline that defines the net usable area of any given room. Now there's a second way we can go about this process in which you have lines that define the center line of all of your walls. And we'll get two different sets of results and two different possibilities in Revit based off of which one you're looking at. So this set of polylines on the right-hand side, I ended up drawing on my own. I just took kind of the same outline here, so we'll have something similar to compare when we look at it in Revit. It came from an AutoCAD sample file. I cleaned it up a little bit. I created the polylines that are the interior room boundaries, and I created the polylines that were center lines. I made them a little bit different just to make a couple things happen, to be honest, in the Revit environment. So there's the prep that's come to the point where we've got these files. Now, once we're here, I'm going to go ahead and go to my CAD pull down and go to Rooms from CAD. In our Rooms from CAD, there's really two different ways we could go about it. We'll specify our layer, but am I just defining rooms and surrounding them with room separation lines, or am I creating rooms and walls at the same time? So let me start with the top one because it's on top. All of my room boundary lines are sitting right here. So this is the option to use probably if you've got all of your polylines that are defining your net usable room area. If that's the case, I'll say, let's go ahead and tag them all. We'll click that, say, okay, it created 10 rooms for me. And oh, hey, by the way, there's 2 rooms that are enclosed and in the same region. I'm not going to delete them. I'm going to say, okay, and we can see that these 2 right here. This is one of those things where I've created some things so we can see some of the stuff that's going on. And really what it amounts to is the room that's defined by this overall area, the centroid of that room, kind of fell inside the same area that's room 7. And when we're looking at it, that's what we were seeing. If I tab through so I can select that room here, we could see that its center point is in that. So we created all the rooms with the center based off the center of area. All I need to do for this is just take that center point, drag it over here, move the tag to the new room, and everything's fine. But there will be a little bit of cleanup. It's not a complete magic button. From a 3D view, that now looks like this. I've got a bunch of room separation lines. I've got the CAD file in the background, and there's a bunch of logical rooms set out through there. If I go back to level 1 just to be able to see things happen, if I'm instead in a drawing where I took the time to make, or I already have center lines for walls, maybe based off of the area calculations they're doing center line of walls instead of face of wall, whatever. I'll go back to CAD, say, let's do rooms from CAD. And this time in my dialog box, I'll say, let's create some walls. I'll do just the basic interior wall partition from level 1 up to level 2. Let's tag them this time with area because why not? And these are all on a wall center lines layer. Say okay. And now I've got not only the rooms, but I've got 29 walls. It's a different layout, so it's 9 rooms instead of 10. And again, I've got a little bit of an issue where based off of what I drew, we've got some problems. Now, the problem in this case was that based off the polylines that I had created, there was a type of double counting of the wall here that was challenging for APIs and Revit to figure out. So at this point, I can either draw my own room separation line to account for this, or I can extend a wall. It's just a little bit of cleanup. So in my case, I'll just go ahead and drop in a room separation line from here to there. And now room 18 knows where it's at, room 13 knows where it is at. In our 3D view, I've got all of those walls set up. So the amount of time we can really quickly generate all of these walls based off of those center lines is great. Now, if I'd done that wall creation from this version with the wall on the polyline on either end of the wall, it'd get really kind of messy because I'd be doubling up on all my walls. I'd have a wall on the left edge of the actual wall location and a wall on the right edge of the actual wall location, 2 things in the same place. There's a heck of a lot of cleanup going on there. So it's much, much better if we've got those center lines. Just for kicks and giggles, that CAD block insert, if you haven't ever used it before and we're looking at this as part of that process for converting, I'll go ahead and say, well, let's take my sample floor plan desk block and replace it with a furniture symbol, which is our standard desk that comes in the Autodesk default architectural template, and say, let's replace them all. We'll try to line up as best we can insertion points and all that sort of stuff, but this series of blocks here and wherever they might happen to be inside the entire model will then be swapped out with the actual family. So quick placement, some different tools to help out with that conversion as we're doing more and more with renovation work, working with old CAD files, you name it. So there's a lot of really cool things in there. That was focusing on a couple things that were older utilities, mostly the new tools. We've got maybe about 10 minutes left that we want to take to get into some questions, but really before we get to the final questions, let's make sure you've got like the next steps of what do I do now? Go get the tools. If you're a current IMAGINiT customer, talk to your account rep. Talk to the person you usually talk to in IMAGINiT and say, hey, I want them. Or go to that site, imaginit.com, my account subscription utilities request, and go for it. It's a link. If you just go to the IMAGINiT webpage, look for utilities for Revit, there's a link there that goes to that same location. A dozen different ways you can. If you're watching this recording and you're not an IMAGINiT customer and you don't get these for free, why not? Let's do business together. The purpose behind the utilities is a way for IMAGINiT to say, thank you for being a business partner of ours. Thank you for doing work with us. Whether it's Autodesk subscriptions, there's different ways we can make them available. If you're doing other types of consulting services work for us, it's a way of IMAGINiT saying, thank you for doing business with us. Here you go. Here's, I don't have the exact number, we'll say 55. It's over 50 different tools that are available to you that we want to give you for free for thanks for doing all these things. And for free, start becoming more effective, more efficient in how you're working in Revit on a day-to-day basis, on a week-to-week basis. You may not use all these tools every single day, but the time when you do need to get into it for batch renumbering rooms, doors, converting centerline polylines into walls and rooms, when you get to that spot where you need to use one of these tools to go through Google Translate to convert from English into Spanish, whatever, it becomes an immense time saver for you, a really essential tool to help out with those things. And that's just, thanks for doing business with us. Go get them. With that being said, again, thank you for your time through here. If you've got any other questions, keep on typing them madly, quickly into the chat area, into the Q&A panel, wherever it's got, and let's take some of those questions.